This video is made possible by Wix. Wix is a free platform that allows you to build a highly customizable, professional, and robust website with ease. With simple drag and drop tools, you'll create a beautiful website in no time at all. More about Wix later on in this video, but if you want to get started right now, and why wouldn't you, click the link in the description below or go to wix.com/go/brainfood. So in the video today, we're answering a viewer question because Jeremy R asks us, I wanted to know what the point of the crazy clothes you see at fashion shows is. Alright, Jeremy, off we go. Fashion. It's an evolving beast, with the fashionistas of the world endlessly attempting to create impossibly fabulous and unique outfits for fashion shows. A commonly seen element of such outfits is that they're often impractical, unwieldy, and, to the layperson, hilariously bizarre looking. So, why don't fashion shows just show off, clothes that people might actually want to wear, instead of going with really outlandish outfits? It turns out, although not as popular as runway shows intended to show off the latest so-called high fashion pieces, Prêt-à-Porter, literally ready-to-wear shows are held every single year by most of the top brands in fashion. The shows, which are meant to show off what's going to be hot next season, invariably feature regular items of clothing and outfits mostly identical to what we, the customer, will eventually be able to buy in stores, or at least some version of them. The fashion show pieces usually have a few minor alterations made to accentuate a given model's figure rather than being cut more generically for the average consumer. Although popular within the sphere of fashion, these shows seldom receive the kind of high-profile coverage that haute couture fashion gets in the press, a fact that segues into one of the key reasons why fashion at these particular shows is occasionally outlandish. The truth is that most of the crazy outfits you see have one real purpose, and that's relatively cheap marketing. It turns out that creating a dress that looks like it belongs in Lady Gaga's closet and featuring it prominently in a fashion show is a relatively inexpensive way to get eyeballs directed towards a particular designer's body of work. Which, of course, is also akin to why musicians like Lady Gaga frequently pull the same stunt. With regards to fashion shows, as Susanna Frankel, one-time fashion editor for The Independent, states, although the more expensive shows may cost upwards of £500,000, they still work out cheaper than advertising campaigns shot with big-name models and superstar photographers, and have a much more immediate and mainstream audience. Wildly flamboyant or excessively fabulous items of clothing are naturally going to pique the interest of the press more, and as a result, outfits seen at high fashion shows have been getting progressively more ridiculous over the years. Think of it like a fashion arms race where the goal is to dress an impossibly chiseled model as sillily as possible. Looking beyond the consumer, though, these kind of shows are also noted as functioning as a proving ground of sorts for designers in order to show off their skills via demonstrating the extremes of what can be done with individual materials and fabrics. It should also be noted that while the clothes seen on the catwalk during high fashion shows are generally never intended for sale, they do often influence fashion in some way. Said influences may be as subtle as the color scheme shown off during a particular show or the silhouette of clothing on display. A popular example of the latter being skinny jeans, which were widely mocked when first seen on the catwalk before becoming the following season's must-have item. Of course, with the more garish outfits, it's usually the case that designers will greatly tone things down. Typically, designers will draw broadly on the ideas to create something a bit more palatable to the general public. A comparable practice in another industry is that of so-called concept cars created by car manufacturers. Like high fashion, these cars are generally designed more to both grab the press's attention and within the industry to showcase things like a new manufacturing technique, material, or feature, rather than the company actually having any plans to manufacture and sell the car shown. But again, as with high fashion, elements from these concept cars are occasionally integrated into more toned down cars that are later on sale to the public. Okay, so moving on to the art side of things, it has been argued that fashion, or more accurately, high fashion, should be considered a form of art, with the most popular comparison being between high fashion and modern art. However, a notable critique of fashion being considered a form of art is fashion designer and billionaire Miuccia Prada, a woman often called she who must be obeyed within the industry. For example, in an interview with New York magazine, Prada stated, "Art is for expressing ideas and for expressing a vision. My job is to sell, and I like very much my job." But to conclude, the clothing at high fashion shows looks garish and ridiculous for a number of reasons, the most prominent among them being to score some sweet column inches in the news outlets of the world, so as to bring more attention to a given designer or brand's less outlandish product. Now, maybe you are a fashion designer and you want to draw people's attention to your designs. Well, in that case, maybe don't spend £500,000 on a fashion show, but do get a website with Wix. Now, I'm not a fashion designer, but I did have a need for a website for our new podcast, which is called Brain Food, and I made this website, which is at brainfood.fm, by the way, entirely by using Wix. Wix allows you to make a highly customized, professional, and robust website. So Wix approached us a little while ago about making some sort of website together, and well, like I said, we needed a website, and so I said, you guys support podcasts, right? And they essentially said, yes, Simon, we're Wix, we do that, and we even make it easy so that someone like you can handle it, someone with no technical knowledge. They didn't really say that, they were super polite. Anyway, Wix has professional solutions for every need, whether you want to host a video, a picture gallery, or arrange bookings. You can do it all with Wix. And if you want to run a store, share music, or have a website for a business you run, you can do it there too. There's no heavy lifting, it's all drag and drop. I even made our website by using a template, but they do allow you to start from scratch. For me, terrible at design, not for me. Even doing something more complex like having a podcast is easy. You just drop in the podcast application and boom, it's all done and it looks good. Wix offers hundreds of templates, unlimited pages, and top grade hosting for free. Upgrade to one of their premium plans for as little as $5 a month to get even more. And you can do all of that by going to wix.com/go/brainfood, or just click the link in the description below if you're lazy. And as always, thank you for watching.